Welcome to one of the most fabled and mysterious places on Earth. The world's oldest continuous civilization. China, today, is a vision of the future. It has the fastest growing economy on Earth, symbolized by architectural wonders and technological advances. Long a closed society, China is now the third most visited country in the world. New China, bold and forward-looking, is also interwoven with a China whose roots go back more than 4 millennia. It has endured as a single nation for more than 2,000 years. How could a large and diverse country remain unified for so long? And who created it? Ancient texts described a first emperor who initiated the nation's long series of ruling dynasties. But there were almost no surviving artifacts from that era to study. His name was Jiang. Originally, he was the leader of a region called Qin, one of China's 7 states of the time. The states had been at war for more than 200 years. By the time the young king was 29, in the year 230 BC, he unleashed a campaign to dominate all of his enemy states and end the centuries of war. History mentioned the emperor's wartime exploits, but there were many facts about him that remained hidden for more than 2,000 years. But in 1974, that all changed. A long drought had parched the central province of Shanxi. Grain was dying in the fields. Local villagers decided to dig a well. What they discovered would change the course of history. The villagers wondered if it could be the head of a Buddha, or would they be punished for taking it? Or was it a relic they could sell at the marketplace? After this first find, farmers discovered more clay fragments as well as bronze arrowheads. Months later, archaeologists arrived. Their leader was Yuan Zhongyi.
I didn't expect anything major. I thought I would be there a week, but that week turned into months. We started to find more and more of these clay statues. The condition and the nature of the clay pieces suggested they were extremely old. We had never seen anything like this. Pieced together, the broken shards formed a life-size ancient warrior.
老师，过来看一下，这应该是一把。
Then another, and another. We were looking at faces from the deep past. Why were these objects made? Why was there nothing written about them in the ancient history scrolls? The first bronze sword unearthed at the site was miraculously untarnished. And not artwork, but an actual weapon from antiquity.
这是咱们探坑里啊出现的第一把宝剑。对。
It was hard to tell the age of the sword. Then, there it was. An inscription at the hilt of the sword that stated it was made for Qin Shi Huangdi, the fabled first emperor of China, more than 2,000 years ago. With great excitement, we continued to carefully dig and discover more and more of these clay figures, bronze swords, and arrowheads. We found the relic site much, much larger than we had expected. It took us about half a year to find the edge of the site. Little did we know that beneath our feet was perhaps the greatest archaeological discovery of all time.
After 2,200 years, the Emperor's clay warriors would once again see the light of day. Eventually, researchers would unearth almost 2,000 warriors and horses in a pit more than twice the size of a soccer field, far beyond anything the archaeologist had imagined. 2 more pits were discovered in 1976. More warriors, horses, chariots, and bronze weapons were dug up. The third pit, the smallest, is believed to be the army headquarters, filled with terracotta generals and officers, leaders of the warriors in the other 2 pits. Researchers believe this pit was broken into at some point and the heads were destroyed. The soldiers are 6 feet tall, taller than most people of that time. Each warrior has a unique face, all hand-carved by hundreds of craftsmen who imbue the faces with emotion, some happy, some sad or angry. Captivating as the clay figures are, they were once colorful as well, painted brilliant hues to make them more lifelike. One thing that time has diminished. Imagine how they must have looked 2,000 years ago, before they were buried and forgotten. A formidable and resplendent army whose ancient mission remained a puzzle to the first archaeological teams. We now know that they were created at the order of the first emperor. He commanded craftsmen to fashion an immense clay army. It was an unprecedented feat, even by today's standards of mass production. Today, excavating and piecing together the thousands of clay figures is a staggering challenge. Though countless pieces have been recovered, they are a fraction of what remains buried. The original archaeologists have retired. Zhang Tianshu and Mrs. Li Shuzhan continue their work.
We will be working for generations to uncover all that the first emperor buried here. Every day is filled with anticipation. Based on recent findings, we have begun a new excavation in this part of pit number 2. Though smaller than the first pit, we believe it will prove to be even richer in archaeological value. This is very exciting.
We believe there may be nearly 100 war chariots hidden here and more than 100 warriors mounted on horses, which could give us important new insights into the first emperor's military strategies.
We are also hoping to find and preserve figures that still have a lot of the original painted color on them. When I say this to people from the outside world, I always get the same questions. What was the purpose of all these soldiers? Why in the world go to so much trouble? One answer is that they were not for this world, but rather a ghostly army meant to protect the first emperor in the afterlife.
The ancient Chinese believed that life continued after death, and it was not all that different from what they had known while alive. They would spend their time doing what they had always done, depending on their place in the social hierarchy. A farmer would still farm in the afterlife. An emperor would still rule. To reign supreme after death, the monarch would need to take the entire apparatus and all the trappings of power with him into the hereafter. Like Egyptian pharaohs, Yin Zhang had begun planning his tomb shortly after taking the throne as king of the Qin state. His rule would continue in an underground palace, outfitted as grandly as his royal residence during life. It would be an immense mausoleum, covered by a great mound. 25 stories tall, its size would rival the pyramids of Egypt. Since an emperor had many enemies, he would need an army standing guard before his tomb throughout eternity. Warriors were not mere decorations. They were meant to serve the emperor in the afterlife as real soldiers had during life. At age 29, Yin Zhang had already survived a coup and assassination attempts. The young Qin king had become a commanding presence with a towering ambition. He would conquer the rest of China's major states in a devastating series of battles lasting almost a decade. Some rival armies were so intimidated by the fierceness and size of this Qin army, they surrendered. Some were tricked, others crushed. Ying Zhang's secret? A massive number of warriors, well trained with superior weapons and attack strategies. How did the Qin army compare to some of the greatest armies of the past? Alexander the Great, who conquered most of the Western world, commanded only 47,000 troops at any one time. Genghis Khan, brilliant Mongol warrior, had an army 100,000 strong, most mounted on horses. Napoleon, who conquered all of Europe, amassed a huge army combining allied forces. At their peak, they were 680,000 strong. The first emperor, according to ancient writings, conquered the warring states by organizing an army of 1 million warriors. Battles were enormous clashes that could leave 100,000 fatalities and countless wounded. But the Clay army reveals that it was not by superior numbers alone that the Qin forces prevailed. It was also through shrewd strategy and superior technology. The terracotta warriors amount to time capsules, revealing secrets we thought were lost to the ages. The terracotta army mirrored the formations of his real army. One of the keys to the invincibility of the Qin military turns out to be right in the first 3 rows of the battalion. Though rotted away now, or stolen over the centuries, technologically advanced crossbows, real ones, were once held by the Clay warriors in the first 3 lines. Under the first emperor, the Qin had devised an innovative crossbow design that could shoot arrows half a mile, and with great accuracy. A triggering device made the weapons easier to hold steady and fire. Infantry and chariots were arrayed in 38 columns, backed by more columns guarding their flanks and the rear. The Qin army went largely undefeated. Ying Zhang had replaced traditional peasant armies with the first professional military in China's history. The exploits of the real Qin army led to a stunning achievement. The first ever unification of all China, celebrated by thousands who could not have imagined how long their empire would endure. With the conquest of the 6 warring states, Ying Zhang and his Qin army controlled much of what is now modern-day China. Many historians believe that the English word China comes from the word Qin. It was a vast countryside, full of natural riches, from Inner Mongolia to the north, to the boundaries of the Yellow River to the west, east to the Yellow and East China Sea. And as far south as modern-day Guangzhou. This was the land that the first emperor unified. The year is now 221 BC. The king of Qin, at the age of 38, has unified the nation. He gives himself a new name, Qin Shi Huangdi, literally, first emperor of the Qin. So communities across his new empire could communicate. The first emperor standardized many aspects of life. All citizens would have the same currency, weights and measures, and use the same writing system. The result? A more cohesive country, which has stood the test of time. With the various territories now unified, the emperor knew that if his new empire was to last, he had to secure its borders. The greatest threat came from the warring nomadic groups that could attack from the north. Qin Shi Huangdi began a massive construction project, rebuilding earlier defensive walls in the states he had conquered and connected them into a barrier stretching more than 3,000 miles. It cost a fortune, and cost as well the lives of untold thousands of laborers. Some 1,600 years after Qin Shi Huangdi, the Ming dynasty rebuilt and expanded his long, mainly earthen barrier into the colossal stone and brick Great Wall we know today. To speed the movement of troops and supplies, and to improve public transportation as well, the first emperor built a network of canals. Some are still used today. The Linqiu Canal, near modern-day Guilin, connects the branches of the Yangtze River and the Pearl River. It was the first canal in the world to connect two river valleys and enabled ships to travel 1,200 miles from inland China to Hong Kong. The massive infrastructure of roads and waterways built by the emperor was one of the keys to the success of his dynasty. Soldiers, weapons, food, and supplies could all be dispatched quickly to quell uprisings throughout the country. Qin Shi Huangdi is one of history's most contradictory figures, a monarch of great achievements, but also, according to some accounts, a ruthless and brutal tyrant. He supposedly ordered the burning of all books but those on farming and medicine. When intellectuals protested, the emperor had them buried alive. With his empire under control, the emperor became obsessed with the idea that he might live forever. He sent subordinates out to all corners of his empire in search of an elixir that would make him immortal. Alchemists of the time believed mercury could help extend life. Until an elixir could be found, he was fed balls of mercury, unaware that it was actually poisonous. No one found that immortal elixir, and the mercury tablets gradually destroyed the emperor's body and mind. He became ever more erratic and paranoid. Having survived at least 3 attempts on his life, he became convinced assassins were again plotting to kill him. To escape them, he spent more and more time away from the palace, traveling in the countryside with his closest advisor and son. His health declined rapidly on the road. The first emperor of a united China, the most powerful man of his time, died from the mercury he took to avoid death. Killed by his own ambition to live forever. He never returned to the palace alive. He was sealed into his royal casket, and across millennia, while hundreds of emperors and many dynasties followed him, Qin Shi Huangdi's vast underground tomb complex was forgotten. The mound has never been excavated. It remains one of the last great historical mysteries on Earth.
The only written record of what may be inside Qin Shi Huangdi's tomb is a book written 200 years after his death. In records of the grand historian, Sima Qian describes the lavish interior of the mausoleum. This is what he wrote.
They dug through 3 layers of groundwater and poured in bronze for the outer coffin. Palaces and scenic towers were constructed, and the tomb was filled with rare artifacts and wonderful treasure. Mercury was used to simulate 100 rivers, the Yangtze and Yellow River, and the Great Sea, and set the flow mechanically. Above were representations of the heavenly constellations.
Legend has it, the stars were made of precious jewels and pearls. Qin Shi Huangdi's body is said to lie on a map of the Chinese terrain he ruled over, dressed in the grandeur he hoped would follow him into the afterlife. The entire tomb complex amounts to an underground city of the dead. Not only the emperor's mound-covered tomb chamber, but an array of pits around it, including the terracotta warriors. How could this monumental complex have been forgotten for more than 2,000 years? On orders of the second emperor, the principal craftsmen who built the tomb were walled inside it so they couldn't reveal the tomb's secrets. In time, there was no one left who even knew of its existence. Though we have not yet seen inside the tomb, researchers have discovered that Qin Shi Huangdi took with him more than just an army. It appears he wanted to be entertained in the afterlife. Archaeologists have unearthed acrobats, strongmen, musicians, as well as terracotta officials and bureaucrats. They discovered a replica of the imperial garden with more than 45 bronze waterfowl, including ducks, geese, and cranes.
People ask me, why do you spend all your effort on the pits around the emperor's tomb? Why don't you open the tomb itself? The answer is, the danger of damage to its contents is too great now. We learned a terrible lesson a few years ago. We excavated a figure with the colors still intact. When we took it outside, the paint immediately curled up and peeled off right before our eyes. In 10 minutes, the color was gone. I felt horrible, but there was nothing we could do.
In the meantime, we're using remote sensing devices, such as ground-penetrating radar and different kinds of tomography, to get a general idea of what's down there. Until we can protect 100% of what lies beneath the mound, we have to wait. That is hard, considering the incredible wonders purported to be buried there. We've confirmed a large tomb complex. We also believe we have identified an underground palace. And, amazingly, above the tomb, a pyramid-like 10-story building, perhaps a kind of pathway for the emperor's soul to leave the tomb. But until we excavate, we can't know if the fabulous things in historical texts are true.
Had it not been for well diggers seeking water for their crops, countless more generations might have passed without ever glimpsing the remarkable relics the first emperor left behind. The Qin dynasty disappeared, but advancements made by the first emperor have made possible the long survival of the country to this day. His harsh rule is well documented, but he is also the man who created a vast infrastructure of roads and canals. He secured the borders, standardized weights and measures, currency, and the writing system. Qin Shi Huangdi built the foundation of modern China. Today, his country is a dynamic blend of ancient and modern. One of the most mysterious and exciting places on the planet. China continues to honor and discover its past, while also taking its present and future place as a major world leader. First Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi searched for immortality. In Emperor Qin's own way, the relics and monumental advances he left behind ensure that his name will not be forgotten. In a sense, he found the immortality that he so desperately sought.